Welcome to the Insight Thru Experience Podcast, created for those currently going through our operator training course and for others who are interested in thinking about joining the organization in future years. In this podcast, we're going to be bringing you some highly successful operators, leaders, and training specialists who are going to be revealing their tips, tools, and some techniques to help you achieve peak levels of performance. Now, sit back, take some notes, and use these experiences as stepping stones for your personal success. This is the Insight Thru Experience Podcast. All right, welcome back to another episode of Insight Thru Experience Podcast, everybody. Looking forward to this week as much as I was last week. This week we have part 2 of our HPO experts giving us tips and techniques. We're going to finish off selection, and then we're going to move into operator OTC and what the HPO staff brings to that process through those 8 to 10 months of rigorous training. Something I also want to highlight out there is, even though we're talking mostly about operators and operator ANS assessment and selection and the OTC process, for all those support folks who are thinking about making the 724 a future part of their life, a lot of these techniques are going to apply and help you when you come up to do your assessment too. That assessment is also stressful, probably not as physically rigorous, obviously, but you will spend 3 or 4 days with us going through interviews and going through a whole lot of stressful situations that a lot of these tips that our HPO experts are talking about these 2 weeks, they can really help you out as well. So today we're going to, again, complete the selection piece with our HPO experts. We're going to talk about things like how to improve your communication or how to communicate better when you come through the process during things like interviews or some of your events. And then we're going to move into OTC process as stated, and the HPO folks will let you know their involvement, how they plug into OTC, and how basically all of them come together as this unified and succinct group to help you grow professionally and personally. So should be a great time. Grab a cold or hot drink, your preference, grab a notebook, take some notes, and we hope you enjoyed this episode of Insight Thru Experience Podcast. All right, appreciate y'all coming along. All right, Callie, we're moving back over to you, and this is the nutrition question. So you told us how the guys could prep optimally before they come, but what we do know, and the reality is, they're going to be stuck with about 3 MREs a day while they are here. And that's going to suck. A lot of them feel like they are not fueled properly towards the end of selection, which I am absolutely okay with. But how can they use those 3 MREs a day efficiently for what you know about the process?
Yeah, definitely. 3 MREs per day is not fun. And you guys are going to be coming into this and you are going to be burning a lot more fuel than what you're actually going to be consuming. That's just a given. However, not only are your muscles just overall body-wise, fatigue-wise, thinking from the physical aspect, but the mental aspect as well, is that when you are concentrating and under so much stress, you are actually burning more energy on top of it. So making sure you are consuming what you are given in the best possible way is going to make sure that you get through the selection process, I guess, as smoothly, I'm saying that lightly, as smoothly as you can. So one thing that I do kind of talk about is you have 3 MREs per day. Are you able to just eat those in 3 big meals, or is there a way that you could actually optimize this in potential snack scenarios, I guess is kind of how I like to call it. So there's actually this one pager that I believe you guys will be getting at some point. And it's a one pager on how to break down an MRE for more of a endurance-based energy function rather than just the basic meals. And essentially what I was trying to do is figure out, okay, in one MRE, you're given all these little components. Can you take 5 minutes to break down these components and pair, let's say, one item with another that provides you X amount of carbs and maybe a little bit of sodium as well as a little bit of protein. And it can actually create anywhere from like a 3 to maybe even a 5 hour energy sustainment in that one MRE rather than just eating all of it in bulk at one time and going from a big wave of energy to a huge dip, to a big wave of energy to a huge dip, trying to maintain that energy balance throughout your entire selection process. Now, that's on top of being well hydrated. You're also going to have some access to a few drip drops here and there throughout the process as well to help kind of replenish some of those electrolytes. One thing, though, that I've seen, even some of the feedback, is that guys, they forget to eat, or they get so busy or so stressed during the selection process. Yes, 100%. But it's, once again, it goes back to what I say, is that failing to plan is planning to fail. And if you are not forcing yourself to eat or hydrate using the little bit that you have in the MREs or the drip drops, you are going to be setting yourself up for more of a suck during the whole selection process as a whole.
Callie, it's no secret that we do selection in 2 phases. There's the garrison phase up front, and then they move into the field phase. What's that strategy shift look like when they go from the garrison phase into the field phase with the MREs, those 3 a day?
So we could potentially talk about how to utilize a little bit, maybe more energy post the big physical aspects of more of that. I talk about like the 3 R's of recovery. You're trying to repair any muscle damage by having a protein amount, refuel. So once again, that carbohydrate source is kind of like your fuel source if your body's a car, and then rehydrate with fluids. So you could also think about it that way, is after one of your really heavy physical activities, okay, maybe I save a little bit of my MRE and I make sure I hit that recovery piece just so I'm kind of replenishing there, give me some more sustainment that way. But overall, 3 MREs are going to be very challenging just for everything that you're leading up to. And I think because there are those distinct phases, it once again is you're very limited with what you are going to have access for fuel-wise. So that is making sure that you 100% are consuming everything that you have available, as well as hydrating and forcing yourself even when you don't want to. And some guys will even maybe feel like, I don't even want to, I feel sick. Well, if you're that, you're pretty much putting yourself on a back burner and you can't catch up to that. So once again, it's really just trying to make sure you stay on top of it the whole time through.
This is a question for you and really everybody, because everybody on here has witnessed the whole process before. But one thing that I see guys struggling with is, how do they know that they're getting behind on their nutrition? What are those signs that start appearing through phase 3, and especially on the exfil, so they can correct it and they don't need us to correct it for them?
Yeah, so obviously you're going to be physically and mentally exhausted. That's a thing, but trying to distinguish differences. And one of the first things that I immediately think of is brain fog. I'm sure all of you have experienced brain fog at some point in your life. I know I have myself. Brain fog for me, I immediately go to hydration. What is my hydration status? First and foremost, just because your brain is actually made up of a huge component of water. And without that component, your brain's just not going to function as properly. So you're going to be a little bit more shut down. Thought process isn't going to be as quick. And then also, I think of brain fog once again as lack of fuel, lack of carbs. So that could be a self-check-in of, when was the last time I drank water? When was the last time I had a drip drop? Have I been utilizing my drip drop? When was the last time that I fueled? Was it an hour ago? Okay, maybe I need to reevaluate what's going on. Or, holy crap, I just realized that it's been 5 hours and I've been so hyper-focused in this task that I've been assigned during the selection. I'm like, crap, okay, what is this? So it's kind of those self-check-ins of more of that mental brain fog clarity. You're going to be tired, you're going to experience that, but can you try to catch it, or at least recognize those signs and symptoms from a nutrition or hydration standpoint?
In the past, I've had guys train together with their long ruck events and stuff, their longer bike rides, aerobic events. Every 15 minutes, am I taking a sip of water? Every 30 minutes, am I taking in a carbohydrate? After 3 hours, am I getting my protein source? So kind of like what Chad was saying with checking in with themselves 30 days prior with the breathing techniques, this is something that the candidates need to practice before they even come to selection. So I have a timer on my watch. Everyone's going to have a watch. Okay, 15 minutes, let me get a gulp of water in. 30 minutes, I'm going to get that electrolyte mix, whatever I have, and really train the body to go that way so that they're just not nugging out and trying to be the strong ranger and complete this ruck as fast as possible without any fueling.
Yeah, definitely. Lance, thank you for that. And that's something that I actually have on the one pager when they come in. But like you said, you should actually practice these proper fueling strategies to know yourself and know your body prior to coming into selection. Because once you're in the heat of the moment and you're stressed, I think that's also where guys come back with the comments of, crap, I forgot to eat, I forgot to drink, because you just get so hyper-focused on what's in front of you. If you can put these practices during your train-ups and figure out, hey, this is what happens when I consume this much water, or this amount for my electrolytes at this time. Is this better? Is this worse? So some things that you can look at, typically kind of a strategy that I look at is 2 to 3 hours prior to physical activity, you're looking at taking in between 16 to 24 ounces of water. This allows fluid to just kind of be lost through urine if you have to go to the bathroom right before that training session. 30 minutes prior, you're only needing about 5 to 10 ounces of water, because there's really no more benefit to consuming more fluid than that. You can also, I don't know about you guys, but if you think you're like, I don't want anything sitting in my stomach as I'm running around doing some high intensity things. And then during, you're also, once again, kind of that 5 to 10 ounces. And what you can do is you can aim anywhere from maybe 2 to 3 gulps of water, just so you don't have to think of, crap, I need 5 to 10 ounces. What does that look like? But you're also consuming electrolytes at the same time. And there's also some strategies, Lance, kind of what you had talked about with carbohydrates, is that, and you're looking, just depending on body size and the type of activity you're doing, it can be anywhere from 30 grams of carbs per hour up to 60, up to 90. You're going to be in that variation range. So once again, that might be something that would benefit you, and try to figure out these testings during your train up and figure out, hey, this range fits me really well. These are the things that I'm feeling, not only physically, but mentally. And you can track that even in your workout log. So you can start establishing that. And once again, the watch, then when you actually come to selection, if you already know your body and you know yourself, you can come and set that reminder for yourself on your watch and kind of go through the process, because there are going to be things that are just going to be completely out of sight, out of mind, you're not going to think about. But the nutrition aspect, if you train properly hydrated and properly fueled coming in, it's almost like that muscle memory that you can draw back from in the times of high stress and high anxiety.
Let's move over to a different kind of stressor. And a lot of guys in their feedback talk about they wish they could have communicated better in things like interviews and during other events. So Barb and Chad, this is for you. What are some ways guys can practice on that communication before they get up here? Because it is a big stressor, and it is usually one of the biggest things guys say that they didn't do well, and they would go back and change if they could.
I would say, I think effective for me, so maybe this won't be effective for everyone else. My first boss when I got to Special Tactics was Colonel Buller, and he told me to be brief, be bold, be gone in all my communication strategies. And I think I've tried to do that, right? So just get to your point and don't add information that doesn't need to be added there. I feel like when you get nervous, less is probably more, rather than trying to say more and explain that away. I think the other thing for a tangible skill, the book Brief is pretty easy to read, and I think it really highlights what I just said, how to be brief, be bold, be gone in a very easy way. And it's powerful. It's why we send everyone in this command to that course. So I think reading that book beforehand, being simplified would help you probably remove a lot of the stress related to communication. Over to Barb.
I think the book Brief would be great, because it goes into the levels of detail that are needed for that engagement. And I think that would just come into an interview or come into an event, you can instantly refer back to that book and like, okay, this only needs level 1 details. So that's as deep as I'm going to go for this. And I can give those details out and then go into receive mode and see if they have any questions for that. Go ahead, Barb.
Yeah, that's good stuff. The only thing I would add is to please try to get rid of the assumption that we are against you. This is going to inhibit you from saying what's actually going on in your brain. And we want to know that. You should trust us coming in, because we want the best for you. We're just trying to get to know you. So I would say, number 1, get rid of the assumptions that it's like an interrogation rather than an interview. It's an interview. When we sit at that hiring board, we want to be able to describe you as a unique individual, and we simply cannot do that without you talking to us freely. And then the second thing would be effort. So I think, you're not thinking about, right, like performing for the psych interview. That is the lowest thing in your mind, right? You want to perform for the cadre and in all these other kind of physically and mentally taxing events. I would say, please put forth effort, because this is a very important part of our selection process.
Perfect, Ben. So a guy like me who gets really anxious before I am going to get thrown into an event like an interview, or I got to speak publicly in front of a lot of people. What's one thing I can get some tangible results before I walk in that room or get thrown in that situation I can do really quick?
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about it, but breathing is going to be your go-to on that. I mean, it's easy. It's there for us all the time. It activates our parasympathetic system, our rest and digest system, so that we can relax just a little bit in that moment. And I think that would be the go-to. I always put that out too. I mean, it's so simple, it really is. But every guy I talk to, every guy that answers a questionnaire for me, they all say they do that. So, I mean, you should definitely be doing that. It's in some ways common sense, but you should definitely be doing it. The only other thing I would add to that is, prior to getting here, in terms of another way you can train the mental side to help you out with an interview, or just simply when you're trying to make sure that you're focused on the TCS, when you're trying to listen to what you're actually supposed to be doing for that event. Because I hear guys bring up the fact that one of the biggest challenges they had was actually highlighting what they were supposed to be doing at an event. And so, one of the things you can do in your preparation, call it the task-focused attention exercise. Have somebody, and do this multiple times, have somebody tell you a 2-minute story, 4-minute story, work up in terms of your time, and initially start off, turn away from that person and just listen, and make sure that you're really focusing in on where's your attention. Are you actually listening to what's being said, or are you in your own head? Are you thinking about what you want to do next? Are you thinking about dinner? Are you thinking about a bad day, whatever it is? Or are you distracted by everything that's in your external environment? And then practice refocusing your attention onto whoever's talking to you. And really, honestly, it's practicing attention control, but it's also practicing listening skills. That when you get here, it becomes one less thing you have to worry about, because you're going to have to get critical information in interviews and in a TCS. And if your attention is distracted at all, you're not going to do very well in the event.
Yeah, awesome. Last question on this for any of you guys. Let's say that I'm in the middle of an interview or an event and it's not going good. Inside, I know I am bombing this. How can I reset in a moment? I can't start over, but how can I find a reset real quick? What can I do to get reset and get focused back on what I should be doing instead of what I have been doing?
Sure, I would recommend that you acknowledge that and just say, hey, man, I'd like to reset and restart, because I think it diffuses the room, right? I think people are hesitant to think that they can take a pause in a public way. And I know that would be hard, but you will diffuse the room. You can reset and give you secondary ground.
Well, if we look at it, you're not fooling anybody. We're seeing it come off the rails too, right? So we're already, to us, what a benefit to know that you realize that it's going off the rails, because usually the guy will just keep talking and then he's already down some bunny trail and we're like, my God, this is torturous. Yeah, I love that, Chad. Just admit, hey, this isn't going well right now. I'd love to restart and reset and do this again. Okay, Lou, this is over to you. I know this is a tough question, but a big problem the guys face as they're going through longer events like exfil, the infill ruck, as their bodies start giving them feedback. Sometimes that's knee pain, back pain, foot pain. And the problem they're having is they struggle to determine what that's revealing to them. So from your perspective, what advice do you have for the guys to determine, hey, what's normal overuse injuries and what's something that might be more serious?
Yeah, I think first it is important to recognize that you're doing something that will probably cause you pain. Just that cognitive acknowledgement that, like, hey, I am experiencing an acute increase in training load that is going to make my joints swell, that is going to make me have pain. On top of that, I'm sleep deprived and food deprived. So you do get a lot of conflicting signals, but like a lot of the psychs have been saying, it's important to know yourself. You should have come into this prepared. You have experienced fatigue at this point, maybe not this much, but you should be able to take a second, breathe deep and think, okay, is this something I've felt before. It might be worse, but can I at least identify that, like, hey, this is not an imminent threat to my being. It's just a sore ankle. That's one part of it, is just being there mentally enough to think that through, which is not always an option once you're that tired. The second part of that is just be smart about it. Like, if you're at a point where there's some medical components to this that obviously in medical, like, one of the medics would be able to give you even more descriptors on, but heat, cold, and dehydration, like, all are going to play a part in your body's response. And those are the most severe things to look out for. If you're starting to, like, mentally feel like you're going to black out, like, yeah, you might be experiencing something that's negative and you need to be smart enough to check in. But beyond that, which is more what I have experience with, it's going to be, if your joints are swelling, that's probably normal if you're especially been walking, how many miles you've been walking. But if you start to feel like you truly have lost control of that joint, or it's giving out on you, or you can't, like, feel it anymore, you have numbness and tingling, those are all signs that, like, you might want to get checked out. There's medical staff that are there and they can give you some good feedback as far as what's safe to continue and what's not.
Ben, how can guys shut that down mentally so they start having some problems, some pain? There's still a long way to go. What are some techniques the guys can employ to get that out of their mind?
Yeah, so there, for any guy that's ever been here, you could probably ask him, and he's probably used a different strategy from the next guy, right? But a couple things that I've heard guys talk about that are effective for them. Number one, focus on what you actually can do in that moment, and not on the uncontrollable factors, because there are going to be a lot of uncontrollable factors that you're going to be facing. And if you get stuck on those uncontrollables, then you're going to be frozen in the moment. So focus on what you actually can do, whether it's making it to your next point, whether it's your mindset at that point in time, your attitude and your effort, looking at it as a challenge as opposed to a threat, but focusing in on things that you can control, things that you can actually do at that point in time. I've also heard plenty of guys talk about, that next point idea, just, breaking it down into mini goals. But then those mini goals having objective criteria. So in other words, I'm going to make it to X point in X amount of time. Here again, if they know the time. Or I'm going to make it to the next point in X number of strides, right? So that way, if you don't have a watch, which is fine, you can do it a number of strides, right? You can, if you're talking about carrying heavy weight, you can say, hey, I'm going to make it to X point, this many strides with this arm, and then I'm going to, set it down as part of my routine. Then I'm going to pick it with the other hand, and I'm going to do this. But what you're trying to do is just break it down into mini goals that are objective, that you can measure it in a situation where there are so many unpredictable things, uncontrollable things, but it's something actually rock hard and steadfast that you can actually quantify at that moment. That can give your brain some tangible items to continue moving toward in that moment. Those would be the biggest suggestions I have right now based on that.
Love it. So we're going to make a deliberate shift to the operator training course here, but I want to give everybody one more opportunity. Any follow-ups or saved rounds that you want to get out there before we leave selection?
There is one thing I meant to mention before, that if you can, in terms of your preparation, a lot of times we want to feel really, really good about our preparation. We want to feel like that it's happening in a very linear manner, meaning that as we continue to prepare, we're getting better and better and better. However, whether you're talking about learning or performance or whatever else, really, those things are nonlinear. And so as you're preparing, you should set yourself up for failures. I don't think a lot of times we think that way, but you should find, opportunities that are super challenging, that you think that there's an opportunity for you to fail, and you should put yourself into that situation and then practice your response to that failure. And if that situation didn't cause you to fail, you need to find something else, because one of the biggest things I think we do hear a lot from guys here is that they haven't failed a whole lot, and so then when they get here and then all of a sudden they're failing, they don't always know how to deal with it, to be honest. And so you need to set yourself up and actually practice that. I'm a big practice guy, so I think you can do that. But actually intentionally practicing how you're dealing with that would be effective for you before you get here as well.
I love that. And I would say don't do that in a vacuum.
That's exactly where I was about to go with it. Like I tried to silo off each one of the pillars, right? It's a global aspect. I think everything that we just touched on in this whole selection prep needs to happen together. It's a married aspect. You know, psych isn't going to be individual from dietitian to strength and conditioning to performance rehab. What happens during your regular duty day affects your training day. So you need to be able to adjust, you know, as needed, stick with the plan. But every single piece that we just talked about is one global aspect that's going to get you prepared to come to selection and do the best that you can do.
All right, y'all. So what we're going to do now is make a deliberate shift to our operator training course, OTC. And I think the intent behind what we're going to do here with the HP experts that we have is just to give the operators out there the knowledge of what the HP staff is going to bring to them when OTC starts. All right, so who wants to start us off?
Hey, Trev, I could say one thing from my optic. I think going back a couple of years, there's still some scar tissue about, you know, the 2015 class, about what OTC really is. And it really is a training course. It's not a pipeline. It's not NDOC. It's not a hazing. It's a training course, right? Like everyone here wants you to be successful. Once we've moved you here, brought your families here to be an OTC graduate. I think we say that a lot. I'm not sure if everyone believes it, but it is true. It's a training course. I also think it helps to understand that we use talent management and hire the cadre to go into OTC because they're invested in the right people to actually train you. And Barb and you guys spend a lot of time training those cadre with Ben to be good instructors to get people through there. So I would just encourage people to remember it is a training pipeline. It's a training course, not a pipeline like they're used to in the ATC side.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Chad. And as we listen to the interviews with the guys who went through this last OTC, I think it becomes clearly evident that there's been a major shift over the last 4 years in the cadre staff and their thought processes on how to train and get the operators up to peak levels by the end of OTC. And that mentorship coaching relationship has really been the difference there. So yeah, glad you said that. All right, Ben, over to you for the sports psychology piece.
The way I typically integrate with that in that program is a lot of times I'll do an intake with you right when you get here. We'll go over some of the mental performance areas that I basically assessed from ANS. And we're going to target some specific areas that you can improve so that you can leverage those for specifically OTC. We're going to build some of that into your peak performance week, which I'm sure Barb's going to talk a little bit more about in just a few minutes. I'm going to integrate quite a bit with strength and conditioning. There again, we've already talked a little bit about the heart rate monitoring, but we do quite a bit of that here in terms of just overall energy management, and then building in a lot of we call them cognitive perceptual training activities, which is essentially ways that we can train reaction time, attention control, target discrimination, some of those things that when you integrate them with your physical world, they're going to be directly applicable when you go to your technical and tactical training. Also do a lot of work with our cadre and instructor group. We do a lot of training from a sports psychology perspective, just like you would train a coach on the athletic realm in terms of the application of sports psychology to improving athlete performance. It's the same way here. We talk about it in terms of how they can help accelerate learning and skill acquisition, but then also performance of each GTO. And then during OTC, I go to a lot of training. And when I'm at training, I'd basically be doing exactly what I would do from the athletic standpoint. I'm going to work with coaches, but in this case, they're going to be cadre instructors on how to apply the concepts that we talked. We're going to look at the training, but then we're also on the individual level from a GTO perspective. We're going to take the things that we did in intake, peak performance, and the strength and conditioning realm in terms of the application and start really applying it to improving skill acquisition and development during the OTC, but then also just overall performance. So that's essentially what I'm going to do for you when you get here.
Awesome. Thanks. Callie, over to you in nutrition.
So once again, as you guys come into the unit and you start the OTC process, it is going to be months long of training, fine-tuning all of your skill sets. You're going to be challenged physically and mentally. From nutrition, how you'll see me is that for the most part, you'll see me jump in right during peak performance week, which I know Barb will go a little bit more of a detail on later on. But you'll get a brief from me on just baseline nutrition, but really how to optimize your fueling for nutrition for the things that you're going to be facing mentally, physically. And one of the things that we also will go through is that I work very closely with our whole human performance staff. So work with strength coaches and the rehab shop as well. So we'll do some baseline body comps. We'll also work with the med shop and do some blood work for you guys. And those are going to be used as kind of a baseline to follow you throughout your career based on different JORT cycles and training cycles. And we can really look at kind of an overall holistic approach. And I try to tie in that nutrition piece component in there. During OTC in itself, you guys are going to be doing a lot of long hours, a lot of different training courses, a lot of different locations. Food accessibility is a big challenge, and I realize that, and I've had a lot of feedback from guys who, especially even this last OTC, learning, hey, this was a really good place for food. This was really difficult. These are my challenges. These are my successes. My goal for you is that when you get into the unit, you meet me, you kind of establish that relationship, and we are able to work together on, hey, Callie, these are the questions. These are things that I'm facing during OTC. How can I still perform well, but can I make sure that I'm recovering? Can I make sure that I'm going to be injury free? How can I just look at nutrition from the holistic standpoint to make sure that I am getting the best bang for buck throughout this entire course?
Awesome. Lou, how about the physical therapy side?
Yeah, I think so far what they've described is just kind of an embracing of the learning process, right? Like that's what a training course is. And we take a similar approach in the rehab shop. We do have more of a preventative model, meaning we will try to do a really good job of baselining your movement capacity when you come in. We do a full evaluation of that, and we use that beginning time frame to really develop some individualized techniques for you. We build it out along with the strength team into what you're already doing with them, so that you have a way of sort of teaching a man to fish, because there's going to be a lot of time during that course where you will not have immediate access to a healthcare provider. Often you do, but there are also a lot of times that you don't. So having the capacity to take care of yourself and really just learning how to have ownership over your own body and how it feels. And then it is a longer process. So there is still, obviously there's some physically intense trainings where we're still very much involved. Really anything that involves the jumping, shooting, things like that, where you're really fatigued, will be there to also just nip things when they come up, not letting you stay injured and have to train through it for weeks at a time before you get care. But hopefully we're there more often than not at the beginning of something, so we can prevent it from getting worse. That's kind of how we look at it. There's going to be, 66%, I think, was the statistic last year of acute injuries. Of all the injuries that the guys got during that phase, they were acute. So there's not a lot you can always do to stop it, but hopefully keeping that time period of care that's required really low through all of those different preventative mechanisms is our goal.
Perfect. Lance, what you got from strength and conditioning?
So on the strength side, we're going to be incorporating, I think we've all talked about peak performance, but that's where we're going to do our baseline testing for all the guys in the course. So that baseline testing is going to be upper and lower strength and power. It's going to be more the lactate threshold system. So throughout the whole course, we're going to have a whole program built for guys. That's going to be on the Bridge Athletic app. They don't have to go around and try to find the proper workout for them. Luckily enough, John has been with OTC for quite a bit. He knows exactly what the gyms are going to be like at each TDY location guys are going. So we already have those loaded up for this next OTC class going. We also know the time frame where guys are going to go with that. When guys are here, we build in group type workouts, build that camaraderie, build that team culture. Also, we like to pull out some instant feedback. Last class, we used a little bit of velocity-based training feedback to where we want guys moving the bar at a certain speed, and it kind of got the competitive juices going. And and really had a good vibe in the weight room with that. One thing that I think our HP staff does better than anywhere I have ever been, and I will put our staff against anyone in the nation, is we integrate so well with each other. During this OTC class, you're going to see, if you're in the weight room with strength and conditioning, you're going to see Callie, you're going to see Ben, you're going to see Lou, you're going to see every aspect of this human performance team really come together and try to push these guys into the proper type of conditioning, shape, rehab, whatever it needs to be successful. And just know that we have the best interests of the guys in mind, each and every single one of us, and we'll meet on that weekly, if not daily, helping guys out. So another thing that we will do is, I think guys need to keep in mind, and I think I've said this before, is these workouts can actually push you into a recovery. During this OTC class, every single second of every single day are going to be competing with other interests, right? You're going to be learning new skills. You're going to be physically taxed. You're going to be on the road. You're going to be away from family. You're going to be all these components, but you are competing with interest. And what are you doing to be able to recover paying that debt to be able to perform at your peak?
All right, Barb, tell us a little bit about peak performance, what to expect out of that.
Yeah, so you'll see us first thing when you show up. After you in process, then we get you for about an entire week. And Trey leads us through a course called Peak Performance, in which we synchronize all of our HPO assets, everyone that you're hearing on this podcast, and additional assets, except they're going to go in depth and they're going to personalize the information, especially for your time in OTC and beyond. We will do baselines. So everyone's been mentioning baselines. There's also some psych baselines that we want to just see how you're doing from a neuropsychological standpoint, from, alcohol, relationships, burnout. And we do these baselines again at reset throughout, I guess after each JORT cycle, and that's so that we can always have a pulse on where you're at in all those areas, because we know that it affects performance. Additionally, we will give you another workplace personality assessment, and we'll spend a lot of time on that, and we'll do a lot of fun, quote unquote, fun activities together. And we will get really good at giving and receiving feedback. In addition to that, we've got an O's coaching program. This will be the second year. So for the most part, you will not see me during OTC after peak performance unless we are working on a specific area for you and doing some individual coaching. Unless you are an officer and you fall into that coaching program, which includes just a few other additional individual meetings and a leadership assessment.
All right, Chad, can you explain for the families coming in, what kind of support network is built by the HPO team around the families, not just the operators, but around the families as they check in and become a part of the organization?
Yep, I think when they first get to the organization, the first person that will reach out to them would be two people. Megan Hughes Willis is our peer network coordinator, and she runs our family support program. So she runs kind of your introduction into the organization. She'll collect your family's information and then put them in touch with a key spouse or some spouse identified at the desk to kind of answer questions. The second thing we'll do for families is relatively close to when they come in, probably during their IFAM week, there'll be a spouse orientation course where we'll bring their families on compound, and the tier commander will give them a brief about, as best they can, what we're doing and why we're doing it and how we're doing it. The other thing for the families are when they're at the DET, they'll have a social worker that's assigned to that unit. Her name's Maria Ryder. She will take care of the GTOs and also the families in any kind of clinical fashion are needed throughout that duration. And then Barb and myself will be there for any kind of coaching that needs to happen. But basically the DET's treated just like the 2-4 STS, where they're going to have by name nine kind of specialties that will be theirs for that, that year-long process, which means by proxy that'll be there for the family as well till they graduate OTC.
Beautiful. All right, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to throw out some questions randomly to you guys, and I want to see what some of your opinions are. So what are some best practices? What are some things you have seen guys do as they're coming through OTC from your specialties that has just stuck out in your mind and is like, yes, that's everybody needs to do that right there because this guy's highly successful?
I think one thing I've seen from successful guys is that they plan ahead with their significant other. So they know that OTC is going to basically be an internal ramp up and an external pause. Like their life external to the unit is going to be on pause for a little bit. And so they will pre-plan moments where they can get away with their spouse or go see their family. And I think it makes a huge difference for their morale during the course.
I love it. And I think it's important to just let everybody know that the schedule's pretty firm. So when you get here, you're going to get handed the entire schedule. We're not holding anything secret. So you can plan some moments like Doc's talking about. Love it. Who else?
Yeah, I got something for you. So just being aware of the threat and challenge states, right? So anytime you're in a course setting, you can feel threatened because it's like you just got to a new unit, you're in a course, and you may feel threatened by a variety of things, whether it's other guys you're going through with, and maybe you just don't feel you're as good as them, or maybe you feel threatened by instructors or cadre members because you feel like they are not there to train you, but when they actually are when you get here. So just being aware of what state of mind you're in is hugely effective for the guys that are most effective in terms of OTC at the end of it. And then the other really big thing is just really coming in with the idea of I'm here to learn, I'm here to get better at my craft. And then sometimes that just simply requires me being able to push away, all previous training, come in as almost a blank slate, bring to the table what you need to, of course, but just, there again, being willing to be trained and learn new ways of doing things and then applying those effectively throughout that training, which really ties back into that challenge state instead of the threat mindset, if you will.
Love it.
Yeah.
Ben gets to see a lot of the course, so those words are gold. Go ahead, Lou.
I was just going to piggyback kind of off of what they both just said, and goes back to what Barb said earlier, which is know thyself from a physical therapy and just physical performance standpoint. You're going to be tempted to have all this comparison with you and other guys, especially in the group training realm, but your longevity is far greater if you know your limitations and you want to work on them, but not to the point of risking your own physical well-being. If you know back squats are not your best thing and you need to work on some of your mobility and things like that, embracing that process instead of just trying to put up big numbers. From an injury standpoint, those guys who are willing to identify their weak areas, especially when it comes to those more like joint mechanics, things like that, and work on them, they will have less injury in the long run, and better outcomes physically as well.
Yeah, just from the nutrition lane, once again, it kind of goes back to that planning aspect, is that food is definitely a challenge when you guys are going to be on the roads. Some places you're going to have more access and slightly a little more time to prepare. But for the most part, you're going to be going when it comes to it. If you aren't planning ahead of time, how am I going to be eating here? What am I going to be doing here? You're really going to be struggling. See a lot of guys come back with not the best body composition changes, or they come back a little bit more injured than what they should. The one thing that I have seen that I'll even talk to you guys more about during peak week, I'll give you a lot of tools and strategies of how to attack OTC when you're on the road for food. But if you can create a bond with 3 or 4 guys, so you're always not, well, Callie, I'm not having the time to make a nutritious meal for myself. I'm not asking you to go out and make a 4-course meal that's going to take an hour to 2 hours for you to do. I'm all about bang for buck when it comes down to it. But if you can get a group of guys, all go in and buy groceries together, and each one is assigned a different task for a meal, you can actually kind of bulk meal prep together and save a lot of time and impact the guys that you're training with. So once again, your focus can be on the training of the course rather than the stressors of sitting back thinking about nutrition, or otherwise not thinking about it at all, and have it come down to it to hinder you in the end.
I think some guys have been successful. I know the last class was really condensed, and it was hard to get in and get a training session. But the guys that actually came in and they went through their correctives, kind of like what Lou said, working on their movement. They're getting out of the kit, doing the post-kit, correctives as well, have really paid dividends. I think if the guys can show up, 30 minutes prior to showtime and actually get, it could be a 5 to 10, 15-minute workout, energy system development, a foam roll session and move on, and that'll prep them for the day, and that'll keep that body moving. Actually, there's an old saying, lotion is motion. Moving around is better than laying in bed for that extra 30, well, I would hope, for 30 minutes, depending on the type of sleep you got, right? But if you could come in and just carve out 20 or 30 minutes, come in, foam roll, stretch, get on the bike, row or something like that, and really keep that conditioning going. I think that guys don't quite understand. In 10 days, you lose the type of energy system development that you've achieved. Without proper training stimulus, you're going to decondition, and that's where you're going to start seeing those negative body comp changes that Callie was just referencing. That's where you're going to see stiffness and overuse injuries from not being able to be mobile, what Lou was just talking about. And if you can just stick to a schedule, that will help you out right there.
And to add on top of that, Lance, like what you were saying, we have a lot of modalities that guys can use. It doesn't have to be your normal, what you're used to, back squatting 4 rounds of 10, and it can look different. And we have blood flow restriction training that guys can use to maintain a lot of their strength without putting all this load and stress on their body. We have a lot of different modalities that we can use from the rehab shop to include, there's Normatec game readies, H-waves, light beds, cryo tanks. There's all of these things that we can do to, it's just not as traditional looking. So the guys who utilize those do have, from a physical standpoint, a lot more longevity.
Yeah, Lou, kind of on that same note, really the guys who, it's interesting because in this community, I think everybody feels like they have to go it alone, mainly because they just feel like they should be able to do certain things and they should be self-reliant and so on and so forth. And I always talk to guys at the end of OTC, and pretty much every one of them will say that their greatest resource throughout OTC are their teammates, which naturally so, right? However, the guys that tend to struggle the most are the ones that didn't reach out to even their teammates, right? They wouldn't ask for help when they were struggling with the skill that they were learning. And a lot of times those same guys are the ones that won't reach out to all their other resources. As Chad's already gone over, there are a ton of resources here. And just, being able to step outside, your comfort zone just a little bit more, just realizing that, hey, in an intensive training program like you're going to be in, I need to leverage every resource I can possibly leverage so that it maximizes me holistically so that I can, really, really get better during this 8.5 months, since that training is devoted to getting you better at your technical and tactical skill sets.
Trey, the only thing I would add is the people that tend to reflect appropriately on the feedback they're given throughout the OTC training course, tend to do better, right? You can see certain guys that will get that 360 feedback the first time. You'll see them in the gym. They'll say everyone is wrong, and they tend to not do well the rest of the course. I think the people that take the time to reflect on those 360s, they're built in for a reason, tend to incorporate those changes and do better throughout the pipeline.
All right, everybody, that is it for another episode of Insight Thru Experience Podcast. That was part 2 with our HPO experts. Let me just give a shout out to them one more time and thank them for sitting down and answering these questions through the experience they have had with both the assessment and selection process as well as OTC. If you're an operator who's looking at coming up and going through our assessment and selection process to try to earn a spot on our OTC, man, what valuable information these experts have just given you. And now really it's just up to you to translate that to your context and start putting in the hard work to get ready to come up. All right, y'all, work diligently towards becoming a better version of you, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in to the Insight Thru Experience Podcast.